U.S. presidents often kill people without due process. Are the presidents, including Donald Trump, bloodthirsty men? Welcome to The Conquering Truth. I'm Dan Horn.
I'm Roger Booton.
I'm Charles Churchill.
And I'm Joshua Horn.
Recently, President Trump sent troops into Venezuela and killed something like 80 men, people are starting to say. And most people that are lean conservative, they kind of look at him and go, oh, this was a good thing to do. Maduro was an evil man, the president of Venezuela. And so going in there and stopping his evil, that's a good thing to do. And when we look, though, many presidents have done the same thing. So it's not like Donald Trump is setting a new precedent because lots of people have done it. But we should really ask ourselves, should they be allowed to do that? The fact is that Maduro, whether he was a good guy or a bad guy, the Bible does say that there's supposed to be process how you do these. Our laws say that there's supposed to be process as to how you do these things. And so is it just, is this how we should be operating as a country, to just say that the presidents can kill people if they think that they're evil men?
And I think, it is important to lead off with that we're not here to defend Maduro. I mean, I don't think any of us are particularly experts in Venezuela, but it sounds like he was a pretty bad guy, and I can understand why, especially people in Venezuela that perhaps were oppressed by him, would be rejoicing that he was brought down, and that providentially seems like something. It seems like God has done that. God has removed him from the office that he was holding. But there can be multiple things true at the same time. And so, this is something you see all the time in the scripture, where God uses one nation to judge another, and then he punishes the aggressor for what they did because they were not authorized to do it. He providentially decreed that they would do it, but they were not, according to his revealed will, supposed to be doing that. And so this is, just because we can say, sure, he's a bad guy, but that doesn't mean that it is our responsibility to deal with him. A lot of people are saying, well, it's against international law, but then, isn't this international law, is it binding? And I think that the truth is that there isn't an international law. There is biblical law, and there's God's law as revealed in the scripture. And there's parts of international law that are actually reflections of that, and that's where they got it from. That back when it was tribal warfare, you could do whatever you wanted that you could get away with to your neighbor. And now there are precedents of things you do and things that you don't do. Some of those are good in accordance with God's law, some of those that aren't. So the important thing is to bring it back to Scripture, bring it back to what God says about jurisdictions, about murder, about war, and bring it back also to the oaths of office that our magistrates and our military take, and what is the law of our land, and was it just under that law?
Joshua, you made the point too. You said, is it our responsibility to do it? And just to kind of take further what you said, I think the point of the conversation isn't whether Maduro or any of these other people were bad, or whether it was our responsibility to do it. It is, did the authorities in power go about it the right way? Did we have, under God's law, the ability, did we go through the right process in order to do it in a way that God said, okay, this is how you have to do it?
I do think that when we think about these things, the first thing that we should recognize also is, right now, people are going, oh, what a blessing it is to Venezuela. Well, typically, this is not, right? It was judgment on Iraq when we took out Saddam Hussein. They could go, oh, we're freed out. No, it was judgment. It destroyed the country. It was horrible for them. You look at Afghanistan. You look at, we do this over and over again, and all it does is do destruction. And so we shouldn't just sit here now and go, oh, it's just been a few days, so it will turn out well for Venezuela. No reason to believe that at all. That's just pure naivety. God will do what God wants to do, and he might end up using it to bless them, but there's a good chance he won't. Because the reality is that we've gotten into a place where we like presidents, because it's our responsibility as American people, we like presidents that like to play God, that think they can kill whoever they want. President Obama got to the point where he had U.S. citizens overseas, and he had a drone kill him. This is just cold-blooded murder. But we've gotten to the point where we're telling our presidents they're so powerful that it's acceptable for them to play God. And they can kill and they can make alive. They can't make alive, but they think they can kill.
Well, they can make alive in the sense that Trump pardoned the president of Honduras, who was just a few weeks ago, who was convicted of pretty similar crimes to what the president of Venezuela is charged with. So, I mean, maybe that's
right.
him thinking
Figuratively, he can
alive.
lift them out of the pit, that's for sure. And we did give some of those powers to the president for good reason, because there are flaws in our system. There are flaws in any human system. And so there is a way to bring justice. But the point of the pardon power is to bring justice. I don't think Donald Trump usually exercises it for that reason. I think it's more political. But it was because the point of government is to do justly. And what we see with this, where you just decide, oh, we're going to go and kill people, that's not doing justly. There's no way that you can say that's doing justly.
And so a verse that is good to keep in mind in this conversation is Deuteronomy 32, verse 39. Now see that I, even I, am he, and there is no God besides me. I kill and I make alive, I wound and I heal, nor is there any who can deliver from my hand. And so our lives have value because we are created in the image of God, and God is the one that has the right to kill us. We don't have the right to kill one another. Now, he has delegated the authority to magistrates to execute his judgment on murderers. And I mean, there's self-defense too, but that's not what we're talking about here today. And so if a leader is taking someone's life by the action that they're doing, they need to take that very seriously, because if they're not acting as a lawful representative of God, a magistrate according to God's law and according to the law of the country that they're in, God will require that from them on Judgment Day.
Right. They're appointed to be a minister of God, as it says in Romans 13, an avenger of God's wrath. And it's only avenging God's wrath if you're doing it justly and doing it righteously.
I mean, and one of the things that seems to have happened here is that the American church definitely has lost the idea that God is who he says he is in that passage in Deuteronomy. I mean, there's a real...
I've said that in churches and got a response, no, God's not like that. And it's like, he says he is.
Right. And and what I mean by even believing it is, there are many situations in my life where I see someone else who's doing evil and I don't have the means. There is no just way for me to deal with their evil. And what I have to do is I can go to someone else who does have authority and I can say, hey, you should deal with this person. And that's the limit of what I can do. But I can also pray to God in heaven and ask God, please deal with this evil. And the issue is we don't believe that there's ever any point. We want to say that there is no point where one of our physical leaders has to go and say that's in God's hands. And that's the answer with a lot of leaders. Is you see a leader in another country, they're an evil leader, they're ruling over their country. It doesn't mean that you get to go, I'm going to go and destroy that country. There's plenty, like when Joshua said, it's not our responsibility. And Roger, you were kind of talking about that you have to go through the right process. Sometimes there is no right process that lets you go and deal with that evil. You know what I mean?
The right process made, you have to wait until they come to the United States.
Right. Or the right process is to appeal to God. Sure. And let God, and it is in God's hand, and you have to actually believe that God exists. And when you stop believing that God exists, you go, all there is man, and man can do what he wants.
I mean, this idea of the president's playing God, we just really need to understand this, because you look at like the Iraq War, the second Iraq War, when President Bush went in, he thought he could just go in there and rule the country. And so he takes out most of the leaders, and the country becomes horrible, right? Anarchy is a lot worse than bad government. But they're going, no, Saddam Hussein, we get rid of him, and then we can get rid of all his minions. And George Bush thought he was omniscient. He thought he could understand the situations. And he had no idea, none. But yet you elect the man and you go, oh, he had 100 million votes, whatever. And they go, look at how great I am. And all of them are tempted to think they're God, every one of them. And when we let them go kill people, that just really promotes them to think. We shouldn't think that when we applaud Donald Trump for murdering people, that he's going to stop being a murderer. That's not how it works.
And to clarify, even though, because someone could say that, well, they didn't go in to kill him, they went in and captured him. But in going in, they absolutely knew there'd be lethal force required. And so it was
an act of war, right. Yes.
I just want to make that clear, that you don't think you can go in and out and do all that and nobody's going to get killed. In fact, that they're sort of applauding the fact that no U.S. soldiers were killed.
Right, because they thought, and I've heard the parallels. Well, what if you have a capo of a mob here, and he calls out 40 of his minions to defend him, and you go in and you have to kill some of them to arrest him, and that's like this, and it's like not at all,
Right.
because the reality is it is illegal and it is against the law to go work for a capo and to break the law all the time. The people who were defending the president of Venezuela, they weren't in sin for defending the president of Venezuela. They had every right to defend the president of Venezuela. If they're a citizen of Venezuela, if they're part of the government, or if they're part of the military, of course they should defend him. So we murdered people that were doing righteously, potentially, in the sight of God. That's nothing like the situation where you have a bunch of people that are defending a mob boss. Not at all the same.
And it's beyond that, because it's not just shooting his guards. It was airstrikes that, I mean, the reporting that I've seen isn't very specific, but it seemed like they were hitting military installations that involved a lot of civilian casualties, people who had nothing to do with, they weren't working for the government, they weren't his bodyguard, anything. And that's something you can't do to arrest people in the U.S. I mean, I've heard of like one case where they like blew up a city block, I think in Philadelphia, and the story is shocking because that's wildly illegal for the police to just say, well, there's a bad guy in this area, and it'd be really helpful if we just blew up some buildings with innocent people and them go for it. I mean, that you can't do that. That's just murdering innocent people. You can't kill innocent people to arrest a criminal.
Right, and they're having to switch between what would be allowable in war and what would be allowable in arrest, and they're playing both sides in their mind, right? I mean, there's real dissonance there.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is because they also have this whole argument, and this was, I mean, from Trump's first term and Biden as well, that he's not the legitimate president of Venezuela. He's just some guy who's saying he's the president. Which I was reading the indictment, and the indictment for Maduro couldn't keep that consistent. Sometimes it called him the president and de facto leader, and then other times it's calling him the so-called president and his wife the so-called first lady. Like, at least be consistent. If he's the president, he's not the de facto leader. He is the leader.
Well, I mean, let's
But then afterwards, I mean, it was even worse, right? Because the person who they say won, they didn't put him in the office. Instead, they say the person who didn't win, the lieutenant or vice president or whatever it is, that was who they promoted. And it's like, you're just liars. Right. I mean, that's what we should look and go, why would we believe other things they say when they lie so much? Right. And if you're going to go to war and murder in the name of the United States, we should really be concerned when you do that with lies.
And so the thing is that, I mean, like you're saying, this is a common lie, I mean, in all kinds of foreign policy. Like, even this whole thing, like, people have been talking about for years, are we going to go to war to defend our ally Taiwan? Well, first of all, we don't have an ally Taiwan because we say there's only one China. We don't have an embassy in Taiwan. They're not our ally. We don't even acknowledge that they exist as an independent country separate from China. But that's just this farce that we and a bunch of other countries play because they obviously are a separate country. China's one country, Taiwan's another country. They can each claim the other, but they're separate countries. And, you know, the principle of whether a leader was elected justly does have bearing, especially if you're in the country, especially if there's, you know, opposition, if it's in the middle of a civil war. It has a lot of bearing. But you look at the scripture, and the scripture is never concerned about for, you know, another country were they elected legally. When Cyrus comes in, when the Israelites are in captivity, and Cyrus comes in and just conquers the Babylonian Empire, he doesn't have any claim that he's the legitimate king. He just went and conquered them because he was a warrior king, and he wanted to capture Babylon. He wanted to make himself a greater king, and so he conquered it. So he's not the legitimate king by succession or by the Babylonian law. He conquered them, and that. You know, the Bible seems to very much have a standard of if you're the de facto ruler, you are the ruler. There's no, like, illegitimate ruler. I mean, there's times where, like, Queen Athaliah gets killed by a rebellion, and that's, like, you know, interposition. They're removing this wicked queen. And so there's a place for that. I mean, maybe if the Venezuelan people rose up and said, you stole the election, and then they remove him, that's one thing. But for us, he is the head of Venezuela. He's not the pretended head. He is the ruler.
You just had a situation where Fulton County came out and said that there were 350,000 votes that didn't get verified. Does that, obviously Biden's out of office now, but let's say it was about Trump right now. Does that mean France or any other country could go, Trump is not the actual leader, and then come kidnap him? There are a lot of people who'd be really happy if they did that, but there'd be a lot of, but we would treat it as an
there'd
act
probably
of,
be a lot of dead French if they tried to do that.
but we would treat it as an act
We
of
do spend a
war.
lot more on our military
Yes.
than the French do.
I mean, the Bible says, obey those who have rule over you, which I think is talking more about elders. But the same principle applies. Like, 99% of the time, you know who's the ruler over you. Whether they got in there legally or not, you know who's the ruler, and obey them. I mean, as far as you can.
Romans 13, right, where you have to submit to the avenger of God's wrath, and that you might look and go, Maduro's not doing it in a lot of ways that would be good. Well, tough. God often has horrible rulers.
And the emperor at that time, did he, when Paul wrote that, did he get into office legally? I mean, most of them, there were at least rumors that they assassinated their predecessor. Nero, there were definitely rumors that he assassinated his predecessor. I don't know if it's true, but people could be saying he's the illegitimate emperor. But the answer is no. He is the minister that God providentially put over you.
And so when we think about our country in particular, it also, you can't allow a president to break the law. This is Lex Rex versus Rex Lex. Is the king over the law, or is the law over the king? And when they go and say, I can just go kill people in Venezuela, the king's saying he's over the law, because the law, that he pretends like it was an arrest, but it wasn't. It was an act of war. He invaded another country. That's clearly an act of war. And our Constitution's really clear about how war happens. It's from Article 1. Article 1 is about the legislative branch. To declare war, grant letters of marque or reprisal, and make rules concerning captures on land or water, to raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for a longer term than 2 years. The legislature has to approve it. They have to say, this is what the army's used for. This is why we gave money. This is what they have to approve it. And the idea that one man can decide who he wants to kill, that was anathema to our founding fathers. This is what the British were doing during the American Revolution. Carleton and other ones, they would just kill people. And they did not want to reestablish that same system. And so they're going, no, it has to be a group of people that say this is the right way to do it.
I mean, and to be clear about how tightly this constitutional thing would be, I mean, one of the reasons why we don't care about this stuff is when they wrote this, if a president or someone used something and they used funds to do some operation that had not been approved by Congress, that would have been seen as fraud. I mean, they are using government funds to do an operation that is not, Congress had
definitely an impeachable offense.
Right. And so Congress had absolute control over the budget. And today in a business, you would be fired if you decided, I'm going to go and spend money on this thing that I don't have any approval for. The government was no different. But now we've created it where there's all these, there's slush funds to do all sorts of things. And we've created this idea that these things don't matter. But just be very clear, the authority was vested in the Congress. And so if you say that doesn't matter, then you're basically going, then what else doesn't matter? And you want to go down and say the amendments don't matter. You want to go say the rights don't matter, the separation of duties don't matter.
Which we've done.
And we've been doing that gradually. So we shouldn't be shocked.
But this one is really basic, because they saw the issue with having one person that got to decide who lives and who dies. That is not how it's supposed to be. When you think about a murder case, right? It was a jury that decided. Anybody could request a jury trial, and the jury is the one that would decide. It was never for one man to have the right to take somebody else's life. And that's the structure. That's a biblical structure. And we've now turned it on its head and said, if the president decides to kill somebody, he can go murder somebody. It's a really dangerous precedent.
And like I think we've already mentioned, this isn't, Trump is the latest example of this, but it's not about Trump specifically, because you have, the Democrats, a lot of them now are saying, this is terrible what he did, violating the sovereignty of another country, but they have no leg to stand on.
They were fine when other people did the same equivalent thing.
You can count probably on one hand the number of people who have been at all consistent, like elected officials, who have been at all consistent on opposing all of these things, because, they've all done it for many years.
And the only reason that I would say it might be about Trump a little bit specifically, obviously because it's currently happening, but the issue is and maybe you could say it's Republicans, is the church is absolutely behind this sort of stuff. The church is supporting this because there's this part of it where if you are going, I will not vote for this, I will not support this, God is against this, and you're praying against these things, and you're not saying the Church of Jesus Christ believes these are good things to do, then you're appealing to the God of heaven. And those things can happen and God can judge your nation. But it's really different when the Church of Jesus Christ goes, we want bloodshed. We want lawlessness. And Jesus Christ hates lawlessness.
But the church said that with Bush.
Right, that's what I'm saying. It's
the church have
Republicans
said this, right. I mean, the evangelical church, let's use that term, has said it. The Roman Catholic Church has said it with more than that. But, but there's lots of people that say that. And that's what natural man looks like. That's not what saved people look like. And when they wrote the Constitution, they weren't naive. I mean, they went, well, at times you have to use force against people. So they put that in as well in Article 4, Section 4. The United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government and shall protect each of them against invasion on the application of the legislature or of the executive when the legislature cannot be convened against domestic violence. If there is an invasion, the president's allowed to act. He doesn't need to wait for a declaration of war. But the Constitution's drawing a very clear line. If somebody comes into you, you're allowed to respond. You're not allowed to go someplace else. And so they go, but it was an act of war against them to send drugs across. Sorry, that's not an invasion.
We'll just find
because
out.
the language is explicit. It's not implicit.
In 3 weeks, they'll announce that right before the operation, Trump secretly signed an order annexing Venezuela as the 51st state, and that's why it was legal. And they'll just say some ridiculous thing. I mean, one reason I would say this is a little bit more specific for some part of the church with Trump is because we have supported it with many different Republican presidents. But a lot of people who supported Trump, one of their arguments has been he's different. And he's completely different. And it's this lie that people tell themselves. It's this absolute lie that someone who's unconstrained and someone who's lawless in all these areas, that they won't take this power and become corrupted by it. And so there's this part of it where there are people who have supported him who should stop supporting him. You should have done it earlier. The best time to plant a tree is, but if you can't, stop supporting him now. Recognize this is where it's taking you. You're loving murder, and it's going to get worse. And it's really hard if you have an unbeliever like Donald Trump remember in the 2016 campaign, he said I could walk in Times Square and shoot somebody and nobody would do anything. And I'm not saying that that's somehow different than President Obama. I'm not saying that at all, or President Biden, not a bit. But the reality is the people that get to that position, they love power. That's why they make so many sacrifices for that power. Financial sacrifices, time sacrifices, they make real sacrifices for it. And they love that power. So that person that's in there, you have to put the constraints on them because they all love the power to kill people.
Lots of other reasons not to support him. But in terms of the record on war, certainly it seems very different in the first year of this administration than the 4 years of his last one.
Yep. Because he talks about bringing the war of Ukraine to an end, but yet Ukraine is now bombing Moscow.
Right, he's giving
because
them more,
of Trump.
I didn't realize that until today.
He's bombing Moscow because of Trump. I mean, weapons that Biden would never consider giving them. And so, no, there's an escalation of, hey, you insulted me. I'll murder people because of that. I'll murder your people because you insulted me. There's a real problem with that. And that's what we're seeing more and more from Donald Trump. So, we've been talking about the responsibility of the church to demand justice instead of thinking that you can do whatever you want if it gets the ends that you want. And this is what Christ came to do. Isaiah 9:7, of the increase of his government and peace there shall be no end, upon the throne of David and over his kingdom, to order it and establish it with judgment and justice. From that time forward, even forever, the zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. We have to recognize this is real judgment on the church, that we allow our presidents to go murder people, and the church applauds it. They aren't even like, oh, well, I wish he wouldn't do that. They're more like applauding it and going, oh, isn't this great? He went out and killed 80 people. Woo-woo. Instead of going, God hates the shedding of innocent blood.
Right. He sent a message to other people who might threaten us that, hey, I'll come and get you next. I mean, it's a very carnal view of power, because it does not acknowledge God. It doesn't acknowledge God's righteousness. I mean, in that passage in Isaiah, it's saying that the zeal of the Lord of armies will not allow righteousness, will not allow injustice to go unchecked. That when these things happen, that he will constrain you. He's going to cause there to be more peace. And if he has to destroy you to do it, he'll do it.
And it's really easy for us not to think that's happening instead of actually looking at reality. We've been murdering people for a long time. And so what does God do? He causes us to murder, 70 million children now? This is what it looks like, right? The zeal of the Lord of hosts will cause justice. He will wipe you out. And this is what we're seeing in our nation. The population of our nation, we are dying as a nation now. We have 1.6, children per woman, which means we're a dying nation. And we shouldn't think that God's just ignoring the fact that we love murderers. You love murderers. Well, what do you expect God to do? He flooded the earth to get rid of murderers and violent men. What do you expect him to do to America? To applaud us because we love murderers?
He'll let us kill ourselves by our own hand.
Exactly. You want to be murderers. You want to applaud murderers. I'll let you murder yourself. Murder the next generation.
And part of what you said, Dan, I think you had said, we desire people in the church are bloodthirsty. And I think sometimes that's by default from negligence. In other words, looking at a situation and saying, oh, that's good, they got this bad guy out of power, or we achieved this or this, and not really stopping to think what's very obvious, to go, what did they have to do that?
Right. And what God's more concerned about is, do we do justly than what the ends are? Right? It says in Proverbs 19:21, there are many plans in a man's heart, nevertheless the Lord's counsel, that will stand. God is going to do what he's going to do. And so the question is, does he do that out of our obedience or out of our disobedience? Because God's going to do what he wants to do. We don't need to worry about the end. His counsel will stand. And so the question is, are we trying to do justly? Are we trying to do what's righteous? Are we doing, Micah 6:8, do justly, love mercy, walk humbly before your God. The church in America does not do that, or we wouldn't applaud a murderer.
A lot of what we're talking about really is the concept of total depravity, of what man in our flesh love. So Romans 3:12 through 15, they've all turned aside, they've altogether become unprofitable. There is none who does good, no, not one. Their throat is an open tomb. With their tongues they have practiced deceit. The poison of asps is under their lips, whose mouth is full of cursing and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. This is the nature of man, is that without God constraining our sin, and ultimately without God saving us to constrain our sin and to put sin to death, we're going to chase after blood. And it manifests itself in a lot of different ways. Some of it is people go out and they actually murder people, and others are murdering people in your heart. I mean, there's a whole spectrum of it. But that is the nature that we in our flesh are wired to go towards.
I mean, there was a comedian the other day who was doing a bit, but he was talking about Adam and Eve, and he goes, when people think about men, he goes, understand something. We couldn't get to 4 people before there was murder. He says, I mean, and
pretty much sums up man.
And I think people almost treat it as a joke, but I mean, he is absolutely right. We underestimate the bloodthirstiness of man. There's this part of it where people don't understand themselves. They don't realize how much they're held in check. They don't realize how much of what they think of as who they are is a result of the constraint around them. And we're constantly going and we're hacking at the ropes and we're trying, open the doors, and it changes. I mean, a nation can change very quickly. And I mean, it seems like the last 20 years, 30 years, that rate of acceleration has increased, year over year.
This is something that, a lot of us might feel like, well, we're not partaking in, that our feet are not swift to shed blood. But when you look at more extreme situations that normal people are subjected to, like there's a pretty famous book, I think it's called Ordinary Men. It's about one German, I think it was a German police battalion during World War II, and it just goes through in detail of how they went from these just average Germans to then killing
middle-aged Germans, right? Because all the young people were at the army, so these are 40 and 50-year-old police officers,
right? And how they go from these average people to then killing many, many, many Jews and being like an execution squad, and they were repulsed by it at first, but it didn't take long to overcome that and to be doing really horrible things. And I just finished a memoir by an American soldier on the Pacific Theater of World War II, and he was saying that like you have these ordinary American boys come out and they very quickly are doing some pretty horrible things. I mean, maybe not technically war crimes, but horrible stuff that they would have never imagined that they would do.
But you look at like Vietnam and stuff, and like you could already see the decay, because what soldiers did in Vietnam was a lot worse than what they did in World War II generally. I'm not saying that there weren't specific instances in World War II, but as you see, as the church fails in society, what happens is that there isn't the same constraint on the shedding of blood, so it gets worse and worse and worse, and it gets deeper and deeper into darkness. And you look at the things that were happening in Vietnam, and let's be serious, Vietnam was lawless. Right? I mean, it was a war that was lawless. Korea was to prop up the United Nations. The U.S. says the United Nations now gets to declare war instead of the U.S. Congress. And then Vietnam, same thing. And so you have this lawlessness that has us go into another country and murder people because it wasn't done with the declaration of war as the Constitution says it needs to be. And because it's no declaration of war, it's lawless. And when you're lawless and you send young men in to do lawless things, guess what? They act lawlessly. And once you're promoting that and saying this is wonderful, they're just going to get more and more lawless. They're going to be swift to shed blood. The fact that our culture and the church specifically, because we don't care about justice typically, we don't constrain these things, of course things will get worse. And this is what we're seeing in our society over the last 70 years.
I mean, during Vietnam, there was a big backlash against the soldiers. And I mean, you could imagine that if people started to adopt our opinion, there would be this big backlash against modern American soldiers. But I think that bypasses the bigger point, which is the responsibility that the whole nation has for doing this. Because it's, you look at Senator Mark Kelly, which was one of these Democrats who came out with this video telling the military not to obey illegal orders. But then he was being questioned recently, like, well, are you going to condemn the president's order and say he shouldn't have ordered them to Venezuela? And he won't say that. Because even though a U.S. senator whose power is being taken when Trump is going to countries without declarations of war, it's his own power being taken. But he won't say that that's illegal and that the troops are wrong to obey those orders. He won't say that. He was a soldier. He probably did those things on some of the missions he was on. I don't know his service record. But you just that's the responsibility that, I mean, the politicians and the country has. It's not specifically the soldiers, though they have to deal before God with what they did.
Right, but we have to deal with God as a nation. We're a nation that's under judgment and deserves to be judged, because we're sending people and putting people into a situation and saying it's okay to murder. Well, what do you expect to get from them? I'm not saying a righteous man would murder anyway, because they wouldn't, because the Holy Spirit would constrain them. But if you put a lot of young men out, wide is the path that leads to destruction. What do you expect when you say go? It's good to murder.
And, we were talking about that, being swift to shed blood. So we've talked about sort of a section of history where it's getting worse. When we look at the broad scheme of history on its whole, while we certainly are in a downward trend there, we have this conversation sometimes about, are things really getting, better or worse? And if you think about our lifetime,
we don't eat our enemies
exactly
anymore,
so you think about our lifetime, you think, oh, it's getting worse. And I go, well, and I would, sometimes my wife and I will talk and I'll say, if we were living, throughout most of human history, my main concern would be that marauders would come through and kill me and our son and take you and our daughter away.
Your main concern would be that marauders don't come through and kill your master, because you'd almost certainly be a slave, because most people are slaves.
Right.
So we forget that part too, right?
But
that, oh no, we were free. Not likely.
But that just that
maybe you, Roger. But
in Roger's fantasy, he gets to be the master.
But in the course of like the people coming in and just killing a village, it would happen all the time. You'd be looking for that, and so.
In my fantasy, I work in some medieval form of data tech.
But I mean, you go to like Wall, which is where the Hadrian's Wall was between Scotland and England. And we stayed at a hotel there once, and where you go, like they built it so you could pull up all the ladders and everything so that the marauders would come through and you couldn't take anything, but you made it really hard for them to kill you. And that was the whole point of the design of the building, was to make it impossible to kill you. And you didn't want to take cows up and stuff, because if you did, then they'd spend the time to actually get up and kill you. Right. But if you leave all your cattle and all your crops and stuff, then they'll just steal that, and so at least you live.
So all that to say, that has been the hardwired nature of man from the beginning, and only because of God's mercy in putting sin to death since the new covenant is it improving, although we might be in a downward trough now.
We still have the promise of Isaiah 9:7, which is the increase of his government and peace will have no end, that his judgment and righteousness is increasing, even as we look at it and we see it decreasing in the United States. That doesn't even mean it's decreasing in the world. It's just decreasing here, and we're so self-centered, we think if it's decreasing here, that means it's decreasing in the world. Because we're such a bloodthirsty nation. And let's be serious, like something like 1 in 4 women have murdered their child in this nation. That's a bloodthirsty nation. You can't say that we're a nation that constrains it. We want to pretend like we're the good guys. That's not who we are. We're a bloodthirsty nation. We might go, but we're not as bad as France. We're not as bad as England. So what? They're bloodthirsty nations too. But we are a bloodthirsty nation that loves the shedding of innocent blood. And when we look at what God says instead, is he says it's really serious if somebody's life is taken, that you have to deal with it seriously or God will judge you. Like in Deuteronomy 29, 1-9. If anyone is found slain lying in the field in the land which the Lord your God is giving you to possess, and is not known who killed him, then your elders and your judges shall go out and measure the distance from the slain man to the surrounding cities. And it shall be that the elders of the city nearest to the slain man will take a heifer which has not been worked, and which is not pulled with a yoke. The elders of that city shall bring the heifer down to a valley with flowing water, which is neither plowed nor sown, and they shall break the heifer's neck there in the valley. Then the priests, the sons of Levi, shall come near, for the Lord your God has chosen them to minister to him and to bless in the name of the Lord. By their word, every controversy and every assault shall be settled. And all the elders of that city nearest to the slain man shall wash their hands over the heifer whose neck was broken in the valley. Then they shall answer and say, our hands have not shed this blood, nor have our eyes seen it. Provide atonement, O Lord, for your people Israel, whom you have redeemed, and do not lay innocent blood to the charge of your people Israel. And atonement shall be provided on their behalf for the blood. So you shall put away the guilt of innocent blood from among you when you do what is right in the sight of the Lord. And God is saying, I will judge you if you have somebody murdered and don't do anything about it. If God is going to judge you, and let's use Israel as a type of the church, if God will judge the church just for not pursuing this, how much more when we cheer it should we expect God's wrath on those people who call themselves the people of God? Because God says, the innocent blood is now on you. The blood of all those men and women that died, it's on us. We will be judged as a nation, just like he said he would judge the cities because they had a slain man that they didn't try to figure out who killed him. How much more is the blood of the people in Venezuela crying out to God, saying, avenge us, O Lord. And God says, I'll hear that. He heard the blood of Abel. And we want to treat it like a light thing. God is just. God is just, and God being just means he has to punish us as a nation when we murder people. And when we applaud the murder of other people, we have to assume God will judge us because he's just. And the increase of his justice will have no end.
I think the seriousness of taking someone's life is really kind of at the heart of what we're talking about here. Because I think some of us more than others, but I think everybody here just sort of likes history and likes to study history or read about history. And so, of course, there's a lot of wars in history, and you look back at them, and that can become romanticized. And so then you have things that happen. 9/11 happens, and go over there and get them, and it's comparatively speaking very sanitized, and we can have our other emotions in there. And I think a lot of it is, just that phrase, the seriousness of taking someone's life. I think oftentimes, as I mentioned it before, it's neglect, or it's just you lie to yourself. You don't want to address it. You want to think about these other things that you think are the ends that we're trying to achieve. And I think that is the point, at least for me, of this, is really thinking about when we're taking someone's life, and what does God say about that? You just said it. He says a lot, and it's a very serious thing. And I think in our society, it's very easy to gloss over that.
It's especially easy to gloss over that when you're killing people in another country. It's easy to look at 9/11 and go, look how horrible. And I'm not saying it wasn't horrible, but the reality is there were more people that were living a week after 9/11 than there would have been if 9/11 didn't happen, because abortion clinics shut down, which caused a lot more people to live than actually died in the towers. So we make this out as this horrific event, and it was a horrific event, but God used it to actually bless America.
Well, if we're doing Maduro math, we could do those sort of things to cause people to live, right?
And I'm not saying we should do those things. I'm just saying, though, that we look at it and go, what a horrible judgment. And God goes, I'm going to bless you. And when we look at these things and then go, therefore we can turn around and kill 100,000 people. The numbers are really hard to tell because, but we killed a lot of innocent people because of that. Why do we think God's wrath would not be upon us? Not that we don't have the right to go to war. We should have declared war if we wanted to go to war. We should have put them under tribute instead of saying we'll send trillions of dollars, but the banks don't make as much money. The industrial base doesn't make as much money if you actually just take tribute than if you give them $1 trillion like what we do out of our idiocy. I'm not sure there's any other term for it. But we so love to shed blood. We so love to steal from people and give to other people that don't have the right to it. This is where we are as a nation. We need to see ourselves for who we are.
Not to contradict what we've just been saying, but there is a part where it is also innocent blood is the big concern, because because it is serious to take a life. But on the other hand, you could argue the Bible romanticizes warfare. God is a man of war. There's a lot of, conquest, defense. These are good things if done lawfully. And they're sober things, but they are good to defeat evil. But if it's innocent blood or if it's unlawful use of force, then it's horrific.
And to kill, to arrest somebody is very different than war. In war, it's reasonable to have innocent casualties. It's really hard not to. You should try not to. You shouldn't try, it's a sin to cut down fruit trees because of a besieged city because it might cause starvation later. So God is saying we have a positive duty to stop from shedding innocent blood. But you besiege a city, and some innocents in that city are going to die. There'll be children that die. There'll be women that die that are non-combatants, and there's nothing you can do about it. But not for a police action. Not for where you're saying you're arresting somebody. Since when do you go in and just kill random people because you're arresting somebody? And God does make a difference between war where you're going, we really are at risk and there's reasons to try to suppress this evil, versus going, we're arresting somebody. I'm sorry, those two are totally different categories. In God's wrath on us for shedding innocent blood for arresting somebody, we should expect it to be real and obvious.
And the problem here is that they're trying to blur those categories by saying I can arrest the head of another country in his country, and that's just an arrest. That's not
even though we murdered 80 people to do it.
Right. You just can't do that. If he came and visited the U.S., then
Absolutely.
they might have a case to arrest him, but you can't go to his country and take him without authorizing that legally.
You certainly can't arrest him in the U.S. because he has automatic weapons in his country, which was one of the charges. He had possession of automatic weapons. It's I'm sorry. This is starting to get really, really, really ridiculous. I mean,
But they convicted Noriega of that.
sure.
I mean, but somebody that obviously has a military, obviously has a right to have automatic weapons as the head of his nation, and to turn around and say, therefore, you've created what he has on his territory to be against the law in the United States. That's just lawlessness. That's the right term. It's lawlessness. And that's where we've gotten as a nation, because we don't trust God. And if you don't trust God, then you do not trust law and the righteousness of law, and that God will bless you for being lawful. The assumption is God will curse you for being lawful because you hate God, and God is the lawgiver. So you're always going to hate law, which is why they go, oh, it was our only choice. He's sending all this poison into our country, which is very doubtful. It seems like most of what he's providing is to Europe and not to this country. But still, we don't know. We have no idea, because there's no trial. There's no argument that was made before the people. There was no debate. There was none of the things that the Constitution requires before you go kill people. So it wasn't war. It was murder.
And it's possible that the president could come and and made the case that we need to go to war, or there's also letters of marque and reprisal. The Congress should authorize action against Maduro. His nephews were arrested with a bunch of drugs that they were selling using a government plane in the U.S. Like 10 or 15 years ago. But that's not what they did.
We seized the drug, we seized the plane. They didn't have the plane anymore.
Right.
There's the things that you do. So Maduro goes, hey, I'm not going to send another plane there. I don't want to lose another plane.
But you have, and this is just a continuation of the strikes they were doing on the boats coming from Venezuela, when they were saying that each of these boats kills 25,000 Americans. You look, first of all, the boats weren't headed to the U.S. They couldn't have made it to the U.S.
They could only go like a tenth of the distance to the U.S. None of their stuff was coming directly to the U.S. It was always going someplace else.
But even if you look at the number of overdose deaths in the U.S., even if those drugs made it to the U.S., they were not killing 25,000 Americans. A lot more drugs are coming than that, and there's not enough overdose deaths to account for that. It's just, they want to make it out that he's trying to destroy the U.S. He's attacking the U.S. by selling drugs to depraved Americans who want to get intoxicated with drugs. He is doing a black market, illegal, and bad business, but that's not this money-making thing. It's not attacking the U.S.
And the ODs are them buying from bad people. People that they shouldn't trust not to cut things with things that are more poisonous. It's all this stuff that there's 10 other people involved. And to point back and say Maduro's the one that's doing it, it's like, I'm sorry, that's just not. And I don't think he's again, most of the drugs, from what I understand, most of them from Venezuela, they go to Europe. They don't go to the U.S.
And even say he is involved with the drug cartels. Is that categorically different than what President Reagan and others did with Contra? Is that categorically different than what President Obama did with the Mexican cartels and providing them guns? Who's to say that that another nation could seize our president and say, you're, in bed with the drug dealers?
And the answer is our military would stop them. But the difference is justice says there's one standard for everybody. We say we can do all these things because it's fine, because they don't have a strong enough. So, right, it's the antithesis of justice. Justice is the system's the same for everybody. There's no bias in the system. Our view as a country, and our view in the church is often the same way, is, well, they can't do that to us. We can do whatever we want.
We're America.
We murdered people. So what? What are they going to do about it? And the root of that is you're saying there is no God, because God will do something about it. He hates the shedding of innocent blood. Deuteronomy 19:13, your eye shall not pity him, but you shall put away the guilt of innocent blood from Israel, that it may go well with you. If you don't put away the guilt of innocent blood, if you keep shedding innocent blood, we should not expect it to go well with this country, because God is still God.
Another fundamental aspect of justice is that you don't allow just one witness to be the one who tells you their case. Right now, like you said, I think, when you said at the beginning, it was a little bit shocking when you kind of said, it by all, accounts, it semes like Maduro's a bad guy, but there's this part of it where you go, the main reason we know about Maduro is a whole bunch of people who routinely lie to us have told us that he's bad. And it's very easy for them just to lie to us about all sorts of things. For all we know, he's the guy they put in power a while back to do things, and he was doing their bidding, and now they're tired of him, and they're going to, swap him out for somebody else. I mean,
That's never happened.
Well, that's the Ukraine war, right? I mean, that's what's so horrible is we do these things and we pretend like we're so innocent and such good people. Well, we're the one that knocked out the Russian leader that was in Ukraine, that was voted by the Ukraine people so that we could put in our puppet. And then it ends up in war and hundreds of thousands of people die. I mean, when are we going to stop being such bloodthirsty,
we had an
evil
impeachment
people?
over it, basically.
Right. We had an impeachment because we were accused of doing what we were doing. If it's an act of war like it is, the Congress has to decide so that there's a debate, so that there's a jury that goes, yes, we agree. The facts that we have, because the Congress, they have a lot more ability to get facts than we have, and they can pressure the things. They can check things. They have the time. They have the staff. They have the resources, and so that you can actually see if things are true. Not that Congress is completely trustworthy. We know the presidency and the executive branch is frequently untrustworthy. But there is some competition there. The courts are in competition. This is how our system was made up, is so that all these people would compete so that the Democrats in Congress would go, oh, we've got a Republican president. I'm going to try to find something to prove that he's wrong in what he's doing. And that's why you have to have the debates, is so that the other side can speak instead of just going killing people.
And that's a biblical principle, Proverbs 18:17. The first one to plead his cause seems right, until his neighbor comes and examines him. And I think you will see, obviously we've been pointing out a lot of the flaws, but you will see that Maduro should get his day in court to some extent. I mean, all of his bodyguard and civilians didn't, of course, but that is something that is a vestige of principles that were stronger in the past, and something that, certain other countries wouldn't do at the same level. But it's also not fair either. I think it was the Panama president. Was that Noriega? I think it was him.
You don't remember him?
No, I don't actually. But I think it because he was tried and convicted. But what they wouldn't let be, the judge ruled that it was not relevant at all. That he had been paid hundreds of thousands, up to tens of millions of dollars by the U.S. government. Completely not relevant. Jury didn't get to hear that. But the American people did.
We shouldn't expect in a system, in a country that hates justice, because the church hates justice, in the visible church. In a country like that, we shouldn't expect the court systems to continue to be just. Like with Derek Chauvin, there was autopsies that showed that he wasn't guilty, the original autopsy, and they told the guy that he had to rewrite the autopsy.
Oh, members of the police were perjuring themselves, saying we never told them to use this technique when there were clear examples.
Videos of the person who testified saying never to use the technique of teaching the technique.
Right.
It was such blatant lies, and now our court system says, forget it. We're not going to. There's no grounds to reopen that case, even though you have plenty of proof of perjury. And so, if you hate justice all the way down, and that's what we should expect. So. The reality is the questions that we should be asking are, even if they try Maduro, how much of it's going to be true? How much of it are they going to let him have a fair defense? Our country used to pride itself on doing these things. But again, I've watched church trials. They don't pride themselves on doing that. If the church won't act justly, then you can't expect the state to. And right now, we're only hearing from one side, right? We're hearing the government story. And the Bible says, don't believe that. There's one side, and there's also, you need multiple witnesses. Deuteronomy 19:15-19. One witness shall not rise against a man concerning any iniquity or sin that he commits. By the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses the matter shall be established. If a false witness rises against any man to testify against him of wrongdoing, then both men in the controversy shall stand before the Lord, before the priests and the judges who serve in those days. And the judges shall make careful inquiry. And indeed, if the witness is a false witness who has testified falsely against his brother, then you shall do to him as he thought to have done to his brother. So you shall put away the evil from among you. Look at the Justice Department. How many times did it lie about Trump? How many times is it? It's falsified data over and over and over again. And, the Gulf of Tonkin that brings us into the Vietnam War. I mean, I'm sorry, they lied. They fabricated it entirely so that we'd go to war. Remember the Maine? We went to the Spanish-American War. I'm sure you remember that, Josh. Or Charles.
I was going to say, everybody at home was going, the Tonkin? No kidding. Are you? Of course we remember the Tonkin.
But where the Secretary of War, or the Secretary of Defense, he was probably called at that time, I mean, he falsified things and said that there was an attack on ships that never happened. So that we would start the Vietnam War. I mean, and remember the Maine, the explosion in the Maine came from inside the ship, not outside the ship. And they said that we were sunk in the Cuban harbor, which is how the Spanish-American War started.
When you were talking about the Derek Chauvin case and the fact that they wouldn't reopen it, probably one of their arguments in their mind was it would tear the nation apart. And there's a point where you always start making this argument about the greater good.
I think the Somalis would be really upset by it, but that's another aside.
But there's a part of it where you effectively become Caiaphas. You know what I mean? I mean, the reason why Caiaphas made the argument for Jesus Christ to be put to death, that it's better for one man to die than for the whole nation to be destroyed. You know what I mean? And so Caiaphas, this is the argument that you always get into, is you end up going, I will destroy innocence and goodness for some fake common good, for some contrived sense of it. And this is where you always end up.
We can think that we have all these sources, but where do you find about Maduro? From the U.S. government. That's where everybody's getting their sources. It's one source. All their their bread is buttered on the same side, or their butter is breaded on the same side, depending on how you do it. All of them have they know what is to their advantage. And so they say these things. I mean, just like we were talking about Ukraine earlier, just like Ukraine and Biden. I mean, the people who were testifying against Trump, I mean, they were participating in the corruption that Biden was involved with at the Trump, that when they testified against Trump. I mean, it's all the same people as you go back. And yet they know what will work well for them. So they'll testify, oh, yeah, this is true, when it was all lies. And we should look when have one source of information that is coercing everybody. You can't say, oh, yeah, we've got a bunch of witnesses. We don't have a bunch of witnesses. Now, the boats look to me like they were probably drug runners. I would agree with that. But yet we don't know where they were going. We don't know, the fact that they're coming to the U.S., really, that doesn't add up. Logistically and physically, the ships just can't do that. But yet that's what we're told over and over again. And we're going to believe this from people who have a pattern of lying to us.
And there was a simple way to avoid killing innocent people, which was to do what they had been doing, which is take the effort and more difficult job of stopping the boats, catching them, and checking, and not just hitting them with missiles from the air and killing them on the assumption that probably most of them are drug runners.
And my guess is there are probably people who are, I mean, if you've listened this long, but you're going, look, he was just a bad guy. You've already lost. You know what I mean? And I think there are people who that's where they're going to go. And the answer is so when you become a bad guy, it's okay for someone should come over and kill you. And you're already going to become one because you're going, I don't care. As long as people can tell me something that makes me think ill of the other person, they probably deserved what they had coming, and that's the only form of justice there is. I mean, people need to actually stop and listen to the arguments their brain is making, because their brain is making horrible arguments, and they know it. And the answer is you want blood. You're not willing to give up those things that you're idolizing more than justice.
And it's really important to recognize, I mean, this isn't that much different than gossip. We don't know the stuff's been proven. We don't know how it's been proven. I do agree that Venezuela is a very impoverished country that's gotten a lot worse since he's been president of it. But how much do we actually know? A lot of it we don't really know. And if they want communists and they want to play with communists, but I'll tell you what, there's fraud in all kinds of elections. I don't know who won. And if Trump actually believed that the opposition party won, then he had a duty to put the other person in, but he doesn't put him in. So don't believe it. You don't know. And look at how hard it is in the United States, where there's a lot more light, how much debate there is about whether the 2020 election was honest or not. Right? And there's plenty of proof that it was not, in terms of that they were opening polling places that shouldn't have been open, that they were not following the law. And so to turn around and say this, I mean, in all these countries, it's really hard to say what is a legitimate election. And no, I don't have enough faith in our government that they can actually say, oh, yeah, this person won a landslide. Trump said that about himself in 2020, and he would have won, but he didn't win a landslide.
The amazing thing is that in 2016 and 2024, I mean, there was no fraud, but 2020 there was a lot. I mean, that was pretty shocking, actually.
You look at our media and what we found out, which it's been a great blessing that God is bringing light to these dark places, but you find out what Biden was doing with Facebook, what he was doing with Twitter, what he was doing with all these things where he was controlling the narrative. And, we don't think when they controlled the narrative like they did about COVID, where they were putting out so many lies about COVID that caused people to die. Giving children the vaccine is completely immoral. There was no basis, no science whatsoever to show that would reduce death, because there were basically no deaths from children with COVID, and there were deaths from the vaccine. And yet they said to do it. So understand, the government is willing to kill people and lie about it and lie to say this is good when they know that it will kill people, and they don't care. And so you have to take everything they say with a real grain of salt, because they don't care. And the church doesn't care either. Otherwise, they'd be forced to walk in the light.
You were reading from Deuteronomy earlier, and it said if someone is found dead, that you have to treat it seriously. And one of the reasons why God does this is because we need distinctions. I mean, we need distinctions in our life. We need these things that frame. If we don't have them, what ends up happening is you lose the ability to, you even lose the idea that you can believe that anyone's innocent. And, when you look at a verse like Matthew 24:12, and because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. And I mean, when we stand outside of the abortion clinic, you can see it. I mean, there's this hard-heartedness to the child that's in there. I mean, it's like if you said to somebody, I'm going to go argue with a woman that she shouldn't murder her child, people will go, well, that's ridiculous. But that's literally where we are. And you start losing those distinctions. I mean, when you were reading that verse in Deuteronomy, it really made me think, because there's this part of it where what God's saying is human life is valuable to me. It has a value. I mean, what it made me think of was there are times where over the years where the kids, something has happened.
You're debating whether your kids have value or not.
No. Where something has happened in the house that it was no one's direct responsibility for, but none of the kids cared about it. Like one time a refrigerator outside in the garage got left open. And so everything was ruined. And several kids saw the door open. There was one time where they brought in food. I mean, some of this was a long time ago. Some of they were a lot younger.
I understand they were
Some
younger.
of the time where someone brought in a big piece of meat that was very expensive, left it on the island, and it sat there all day and had to be thrown away. And both of those times I came in and I was very legitimately upset at them, because there was this part where I'm going and they're going, I didn't bring it in. I didn't do it. And I'm going, did you see it? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, did you care? And they're like, they have no evidence.
Grits for a week. That would have been my response. And you didn't care for meat. I guess you don't want any meat.
But that's literally what God's doing with that thing. You find a dead body. I'm telling God's going, you have to care. You have to care that someone died. And you think about it, how many times do we, how many babies die and people go, well, what are you going to do?
Right.
What are you going to do about it? You know what I mean?
And I mean, this also reminds me of these videos I've been watching that the White House has been putting out on social media, as well as a few different Border Patrol accounts. And it's like these, some of it was with the drone strike or with the boat strikes, and more with it's like these sizzle reels of like the one I saw is playing Jingle Bells, and the jingling is the chains of people walking away to be deported. And I'm not saying the president shouldn't enforce the law, but there's a certain sobriety that's appropriate in dealing with criminals and recognizing that, they shouldn't be, villains on the screen just played, with, snazzy music. And then who's cheerleading that? Those videos are to appeal to, Republicans, evangelicals, all these people. And it just seems like the love is growing cold. They're well done videos, but and they're appealing. I see how they're appealing, but are they appealing to good things? It seems like they're appealing to pretty insidious parts of the heart to say,
Right.
I am on Team America. We are the best. We do nothing wrong. All of our enemies are, animals, which Trump calls them. It doesn't seem good.
Right?
Well-
They're still made in the image of God.
Right.
And a lot of them, and I'm not saying that you don't deal with them as lawbreakers, but a lot of them came simply because we opened the doors and said, we'll give you lots of handouts so that you can feed your family. And they come here to feed their family. Their motives, they broke the law. They should be dealt with as lawbreakers, but we shouldn't impinge their motives. Most of their motives are, we want an easier life and an easier life for our children, which is the same motives that all of us have.
Or they were brought here as infants and they didn't
Right.
even come.
Right.
They were brought. They were carried.
I'm saying even the current ones now that they're doing that too. But this idea of lawlessness, when it abounds, the love of many will grow cold. Well, when the love of many grows cold, then lawlessness abounds more. It's kind of a cycle, and it just gets worse and worse. And that's what we're seeing in our country. You look at the divisions and the animosity, not just the political divisions between the Democrats and the Republicans, but the hatred and the animosity and the willingness to do impeachments that are completely farcical. I mean, they're completely made up, right? I mean, they know that they were made up and they're still doing it. This is just, there's such an anger and a bitterness. And when we accept lawlessness that say you can murder somebody, well, if you can murder, if you can, who did Biden murder? He murdered various people at various times. I'm trying to remember some specific examples. He wasn't like Clinton in his aspirin factory that he bombed and to kill people just to get, his sex scandal off the front page. You look at this and you go, okay, so people's response to that, when you have that lawlessness, it's to them, they embrace it and they go, I can do that lawlessness too. This is convenient, so I'll do it. Well, if I can see something sitting out there, if I see money sitting on the road that's somebody else's money, why shouldn't I take it? Because that lawlessness breeds more and begets more lawlessness. It just keeps increasing because everybody stops caring about each other. And so you can look at this issue and go, well, it's the government and that's not good, but it's permeated through our whole society. Because if you accept lawlessness and things like, who are you allowed to murder? Who do we applaud our president for murdering? You're going to accept lawlessness everywhere.
I think a good example of that is if you look at the amount of fraud going on. I'm sure we've had fraud since the inception of the country. But as you see, especially since it seems around COVID and all of that, that it's really expanded because there was enough people who said, oh, it's $1 million, which is nothing compared to this, so $1 million for me would be a lot, but will hardly show up on this balance sheet somewhere, so I can get that.
And then they find out they can steal $1 billion.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, and the heart of lawfulness for our system is you don't just have one person do it. And it's the heart of lawlessness for putting people to death. It's the center of it for God's system too. No king in God's system is allowed to put somebody to death. Nebuchadnezzar did, right? All the pagan kings, they all did. They all said that they have the power of life and death. But that's not what God says. Deuteronomy 21:21. Then all the men of his city shall stone him to death with stones. So you shall put away the evil from among you, and all Israel shall hear and fear. God says the society has to go, right? Which is, it's kind of replicated by our jury system, that the jury's representing the people, and the jury has to say this person is worthy of death. I'm not saying it's a perfect representation. It's better for the whole city to take them out and stone them. But that's the picture, is that the elders of the city, they could go, this guy's a murderer. And the answer is, you're not allowed to go kill him anyway. It's the people of the city that need to stone him.
And notice it says hear and fear, not hear and cheer.
Right.
I mean, but that's not the demeanor that we're getting.
Right.
And when people go, well, Congress is this corrupt institution. But the answer is, people have probably experienced this. Have you ever seen someone in authority who says you should do something, but they won't sign off on it? There's a real difference when you ask somebody, I want you to sign, you need to sign your name that this was done under your authority. And the answer is even though Congress has all their corruption, if something looks like they don't want to go and stand in front of their constituents, they don't want to go and say, yes, we did this. And there's cases where they go, what you think is a really strong case, they're like, I'm not going to stand there and say that this is the right thing to do. And this is why you go through the process. there are a lot of people who like to do things through backdoor deals and as opposed to doing them in righteous ways. And the answer is in a righteous way, it forces people to take responsibility for things.
And that's how you get rid of the corruption. If you allow people to be lawless and elect people that won't say, wait a second, this is unconstitutional, I'm not going to vote for it. If you let people be lawless, guess what? They're going to be corrupt. Those two are the same terms. I mean, they mean the same thing. Effectively, that's the cause of lawlessness is corruption. So we're electing people intentionally and deliberately. We're choosing corrupt people because they say we'll steal from other people to give us money, right? So it's like, what goodies will you give us? What list of projects are you going to do that we can steal from somebody else to give us money? And so we shouldn't be surprised when they're corrupt because they're representing the people who elected them. The people who elected them are corrupt. The people who elected them are choosing murder. We're choosing murder at the abortion clinic all over this country. But we're also choosing, we like it, hey, let's just do the simple solution. Let's just go murder 80 people rather than doing the difficult work of being just. And that's what our country wants, and that's who's we're elected. The big problem is that's not what God wants. And he will get the final say.
So in this current situation, if the administration had gone to Congress and gotten a declaration of war, even if the maybe the facts are like, well, we really shouldn't do that. But if he'd gotten approval from Congress, then would you say that would not be?
Then it would not have been President Trump murdering people.
Right. Might have been
say that. It may have been an unjust war. It may have been that God will judge us for the war. But the reality is that's so much harder to do.
Right.
Because every single congressman would go back. And when you have a 10-year war like Afghanistan, the congressman would have to answer for it. And now they don't have to answer for it. They just go, well, we
He
started,
did
we're
this.
in there.
That's
He
what
did
he did.
this. We have to keep funding it. We have to keep murdering people.
Which is why Trump said he was against the Iraq War and against all these wars that he wasn't in charge of starting.
Right. And now
And-
he's getting very big into starting wars.
And in many ways, the Congress, a lot of members of Congress are probably, even though they might speak out against it, they might be in favor that he did it, but because they can play both sides of the fence.
And just to be blunt, right? There is so much money made in war. And you have a congressman like the congressman from Minnesota that went from having nothing to having $30 million in 2 years. The Congress gets rich off of these things. They know what's going to happen in war. They know what's going to happen. They know where to invest. They get rich off of these things. So they're getting paid off. They're corrupt.
And you look at how far gone it is that now I read today that the Democrats want to pass a bill that the president can't invade Greenland. Because, now his war power extended. Now we need to start a list of countries you can't take over, countries you can't attack.
It's the Bill of Rights, right? It's an enumerated list. Yeah, this isn't just the power, the freedoms you have, but that's what it's going to become.
And so when we look at this, we have to recognize the church isn't different. The church should be so different. The church should hate the shedding of blood. We're supposed to have a heart and a mind like God's heart and God's mind. We're supposed to think his thoughts after him. And he hates the shedding of innocent blood, and the church cheers these things. This is a really, really dangerous thing. Like when you read Psalm 5, where David's making the contrast between the unbelievers and the believers. Psalm 5, 4-9. For you are not a God who takes pleasure in wickedness, nor shall evil dwell with you. The boastful shall not stand in your sight. You hate all workers of iniquity. You shall destroy those who speak falsehood. The Lord abhors the bloodthirsty and deceitful man. But as for me, I will come into your house in the multitude of your mercy. In fear of you, I will worship toward your holy temple. Lead me, O Lord, in your righteousness because of my enemies. Make your way straight before my face, for there is no faithfulness in their mouth. Their inward part is destruction. Their throat is an open tomb. They flatter with their tongue. God abhors these people. These are not his children. If you're cheering that Maduro, got what was coming to him and the people that were defending him, well, they shouldn't have defended him, you should really go, why do you think you're not a bloodthirsty man? And God abhors them. It's not like he has this like, oh yeah, they really shouldn't do that. This is something God hates. There's a reason why the first story after the fall is Cain and Abel. because we're supposed to recognize this is how despicable it is. And we look at these things and go, not that big of a deal. That's where most of the church is, hey, Maduro was a bad man. Some people may have willingly taken drugs that killed him from him or from somebody else that's somewhere, and we don't really know how that works. But Maduro's a really bad man. And not go, does that give you the right to kill his security forces? Really? That gives you the right to murder his security forces because Maduro's a really bad man.
It gives you a right to break the law.
And murder his security forces.
Right.
Really? That gives you that right? And then you're going to punish him for having an army even though he's a different country? I mean, and people are cheering this instead of mourning it. God abhors bloodthirstiness. And we're a very bloodthirsty nation. And it manifests itself in the abortion clinic, but it also manifests itself in the nursing homes, and it manifests itself in what we do with our military. God has given us much money. We spend so much of it on being able to project power and kill people when we want to. Think of the wars we've been in. Think of all the people who died because we said we have the right to go and be the government for another country, but yet we don't want to do the work. So we kind of pseudo take over Afghanistan. We pseudo take over Iraq, and lots of people die. Because we don't actually want to conquer them because that's not the right thing to do. That's colonialism. That's evil. No, what's evil is to do what we keep doing, where we just go and murder people.
Another verse that applies here is Isaiah 59, verses 1 through 4. Behold, the Lord's hand is not shortened, that it cannot save, nor his ear heavy, that it cannot hear. But your iniquities have separated you from your God, and your sins have hidden his face from you, so that he will not hear. For your hands are defiled with blood, and your fingers with iniquity. Your lips have spoken lies, your tongue has muttered perversity. No one calls for justice, nor does any plead for truth. They trust in empty words and speak lies. They conceive evil and bring forth iniquity.
No one calls for justice, nor does any plead for truth. That's where we are as a nation. And that is the real shame of the church. Because this is what the church's responsibility is. We are supposed to be the people that walk in truth. Jesus Christ, if we are part of Christ, if we are the body of Christ, he is truth. And nobody pleads for truth. Nobody pleads for justice. Nobody pleads for God's processes to be followed. And it's not anybody else's responsibility. Judgment begins in the house of the Lord for a reason. Because we're the ones that have truth, and we're not pleading for it. We're the ones that should say, they're made in the image of God. Stop destroying them. And instead, the church goes, woo! And we should just recognize how much the church is under the judgment of God. Because so much of it is false. Because he abhors bloodthirsty men. They're not saved. He abhors them.
And even a step before that, even if you're not calling to start, is asking questions. Saying, okay.
Well, that's how you're pleading for. I would
Right,
argue
yeah,
that's
yeah.
pleading for truth, is to ask questions and say, what's really going on? What's your evidence that he's killing 25,000 people with every boat? Because you know it's a lie. We know it's a lie.
It was several years ago that there was a press briefing where a guy got up and he goes, so we have this information that this such and such a group was doing something, and one of the reporters goes, so what's the evidence? And he goes, this is the evidence right now. I'm telling you they did it. And he goes, no, I'm saying, what is your evidence that you know this? And he goes, I'm giving it to you right now. We know that they're bad. And he's like, how do you know that they're bad? And he's like, this is the evidence. This is
I said so.
Right. And I mean,
and he was like blind to the idea that anybody could actually say, we want to know truth. I'm not really interested in your opinion.
Right, truth doesn't come from your mouth; it comes from the existence
Witnesses.
of it in the world, right?
And you being a third hand, fourth hand, 20th hand witness, like the spokesman for the Secretary of Defense, which is who that was. That's not truth.
Supposed to just say classified is classified.
Right. That's the other way they do it. And you know, but again, it's so easy to look and describe these things and go, oh, it's so horrible. But things like FOIA, I mean, there are ways that we, the Freedom of Information Act, there are ways that we can actually plead for truth that 50 years ago, 70 years ago, were a lot harder to do. So it's not like all hopeless, But if the church doesn't care for truth, if the church doesn't care for justice, if it doesn't say, this is our duty to do justly, if it doesn't care about justice, we should just expect more innocent blood to be shed, and we should expect our blood to be shed because God says, I hate the shedding of innocent blood, and I will judge those who shed it.
And we say this in a number of episodes so that people don't get confused, but just we should say it again. The Church of Jesus Christ does care. The Church of Jesus Christ is caring about truth. So the question is, how many of the people who say they're part of it are actually part of it? You know, you say you're a part of it. I say I'm a part of it. Do I actually do the thing? Do I care about justice? Or do I just pay lip service to it? Do I do a podcast and then I go home and I'm unjust with my children? I'm unjust. You know what I mean? That's the question. Because if you're not just, you are not part of the body of Christ. If you don't care about, not if you ever sin, but if your care is not for God's righteousness.
And Donald Trump's approval rating went up a few points over the last few days because he knows we're bloodthirsty people. He knows that of Americans. The problem is he also knows it about the visible church. On December 25th, he bombed Sokoto in Nigeria. Sokoto, it's not where maybe there were camps there. That's what they claimed. He claimed he got the information from the Nigerian government. If he got it from the Nigerian government is far more pro Boko Haram and Fulani than anti. So the chances that they're real is very unlikely. So he bombed a bunch of people. And he did it for one reason, because he knew it would appeal to the church in America. Here's what he posted on True Social. Tonight at my direction as Commander-in-Chief, or it may have been X, but I don't remember. But tonight at my direction as Commander-in-Chief, the United States launched a powerful and deadly strike against ISIS terrorist scum in northwest Nigeria, who have been targeting and viciously killing primarily innocent Christians at level not seen for many years, and even centuries. I've previously warned these terrorists that if they do not stop the slaughtering of Christians, there will be hell to pay. And tonight there was. The Department of War executed numerous perfect strikes, as only the United States is capable of doing. Under my leadership, our country will not allow radical Islamic terrorism to prosper. May God bless our military, and Merry Christmas to all, including the dead terrorists, of which there will be many more if their slaughter of Christians continues. He knows that the church will be pleased that he said, Merry Christmas to dead terrorists. This is sick. And he's right. That's the sickest part of it. His approval went up with the things that he's been doing. And he's basically going, he said the Christmas present to the terrorists was to do bombs. But the reality is went, Christians will like this because everybody's talking about these poor persecuted Christians in Nigeria. So I'll go bomb some people. All the stuff, Sokoto, that state is not where the stuff is happening. That's a majority Muslim state. That's not where it's happening. They might have a training camp there, but that's not where all the terrorists are coming from. But yet he goes and kills people because he knows the American church will go, rah, rah, rah. We have a good Christmas. We've murdered people.
Well, to Joshua's point earlier too, even just assume for a second, this was all completely just, and these were whatever who he got is just the lack of solemnity in how it's handled. Like you're killing people, and it's kind of a punchline delivery.
Well, it's just to approve his approval rating, I think.
And it's coming back to that. Do we have a weightiness to human life? Because even if these people were terrorists, they're made in the image of God. And so even if someone had stepped in and they were attacking people and you had to kill them as part of that, you still shouldn't be joking about it.
Right.
They're still made in the image of God. And if you had to justly kill them to stop them from killing other people, that would be just. But it's not something that you...
And the idea that you would bomb a terrorist camp and it would just be terrorists is completely contrary to reality. Right? What they do is they kidnap girls. And so who do you think is feeding people at these camps? Who do you think is doing laundry at these camps? Who do you think is in the bedrooms of these men that are raping them every night? I mean, you just killed the victims. If you actually bombed a camp, you killed the victims. Congratulations. The love of the visible church for justice has been declining for many years. And we're seeing it now that the desire for justice in our society is declining. And the desire just to get what we want, to get the end we want. And all that is forgetting who God is. All that is forgetting that God is just. And we may not act justly, but God is just. That should cause terror to come upon the American church. Thanks for joining us.
This has been The Conquering Truth, a project of Reformation Baptist Church. If you found this helpful, you can visit us online at theconqueringtruth.com and subscribe here or in your favorite podcast app. Thanks for watching.